Now, I grant this video should have been made well, I wouldn't say a long time ago, but it should have been made at the very least a few days ago, if nothing else. But I want to make this video because it's relating to Tommy Robinson. Good morning, everyone. I hope everyone's doing well. So, anybody who's been keeping up with the latest news with Tommy Robinson will know that the snake known as Nick Lowles, and now I actually do know what his bloody name is, not Nick Knowles, like the BBC presenter who did, what's that show called? I can't even remember now. Perfection, that was it. But anyway, enough about that guy. Nick Lowles is pushing for Tommy Robinson to be jailed for 2 years for contempt of court for basically stuff that was relating to Jamal. You remember that Muppet? The one who cried that he was basically being waterboarded even? Or that mainstream media basically said, oh, Bailey has waterboarded this poor Syrian refugee, when it turned out he was actually a bully who'd been attacking people, even attacked one of the girls, I believe, with a hockey stick. You know, crucial information that the mainstream media would like to admit, because they're not journalists, they're activists. And they will always virtue signal to the poor refugee, rather than actually do some research and find out what's going on. But that's the mainstream media for you. But what makes this particularly egregious, and I'm not talking about what they're trying to do Tommy in for, is the fact that the Attorney General is taking up this case. Not even a bloody judge, which in and of itself would be bad enough. This is the government, basically. The Attorney General, not a judge, the government are pushing for this. And why do you think they're pushing for this? Have a wild guess. Do you think it could be because of the march on the 1st of June that Tommy Robinson did, where he got 20,000 plus people out there? Something tells me I think that would be a very good reason for the establishment to be absolutely batshit scared of Tommy Robinson. But of course, the mainstream media won't tell you this. You know the drill, because, say it with me, folks, it doesn't suit the narrative. They don't want to admit that Tommy Robinson has got the government scared, because his voice could spur a whole load of people into action, which is something the mainstream media could never dream of achieving, which is something the government could never dream of achieving, that the left wing might be able to do, but in the end they're all a bunch of criminals anyway in most cases. And I say that with the utmost confidence, because I consider the pro-Palestinians left wing, and I consider supporting Palestine, and as well, more importantly, Hamas, to be linked to supporting a terrorist group. So that would unequivocally make them criminals. And that same logic also applies to the dickheads who went to the Stonehenge from Just Stop Oil and decided to vandalise that. To which, to them, I simply say, how dare you damage and deface one of the biggest iconic monuments in Britain. But this comes down to the establishment want to lock Tommy Robinson up. They may not be stopping him from doing his protest on the 27th of July, but it doesn't change the fact that June 29th, they'll try to have him jailed. Oh, sorry. I actually messed up the first bit. Because, I mean, technically, no, I haven't, because that is information that is technically in what's being leaked, but it's the fact that there was a film, Silenced, that was being put out, that basically he was given an injunction over. Tommy Robinson was told, even though this was extremely fascistic of the government, you're not allowed to leak that. If you leak that, you're going to prison. He obeyed that, even though it was draconian. even though it was fascistic in nature, and in fact, it is a true injustice. He obeyed that. But it got leaked out to the US, and the US leaked that documentary, silenced. This was completely out of Tommy Robinson's hands. But this is, again, something the mainstream media do not want to talk about. They do not want to tell us this, because they know it would undermine the case for what they're trying to put Tommy through. Funny how I say that with a cop car going. Anyway, this is something they want to admit because they want the maximum chance possible to send Tommy Robinson to prison. That's what it boils down to. And they are, ironically, same name as the documentary, ironically, they're trying to do this to silence Tommy Robinson. But all they're doing is giving him an even bigger voice. As the old saying goes, if you cut out a man's tongue, you do not prove what the man is saying is wrong, but rather you fear what that person might say. That's what it effectively comes down to. So like I said before, when it comes down to government corruption, what this effectively comes down to now is that there are people who, in the government is basically using both their arms to try and grab and silence Tommy. They're grabbing him to try and suppress his ability to communicate with us. He is suppressing his God-given right to free speech, to be able to say what he thinks and believes, as long as it doesn't promote terrorism or violence. That's what they're doing right now. And all this, of course, while continuing to ignore the pro-Palestines who are calling for the genocide of Jews. Now, I don't know about you, but if I had a choice between prioritising arresting Tommy Robinson and arresting hundreds, if not thousands, of Palestine/Islamic sympathising wankers who want to call for jihad and violence in our streets, do you think I'm going to be arresting Tommy Robinson first? No, I wouldn't. In fact, he wouldn't be getting arrested at all, but that's beside the point. The point is, I'd be prioritising what's a much bigger threat. And I can tell you right now that thousands of people definitely outweigh the threat of one man. I think people calling for this jihad and violence and for Sharia law/a caliphate, I think that's a bit more important than silencing a person just because his documentary got out. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I've lost the plot. But I thought that was something called common sense, which seems to be very uncommon these days. And bear in mind, as well, bringing this back to Nick Lowles, this guy who founded Searchlight, who then became Hope Not Hate, or maybe I was right first time, had basically gone out of his way with his little cronies to overinflate hate crime statistics by 3,000%. Not 3%, not 30%, not even 300%. 3,000%. At that point, the moment that was found out, rather than be taken as credible by mainstream media or NATO or the UN or whoever, they should have been consigned to the trash can of history. But again, the 3,000% thing is something the mainstream media won't want to reveal to anyone, because they know it would damage their narrative, it would undermine their credibility as well, and make them look stupid, which is something they obviously cannot have. So effectively, what it comes down to is this. They are trying to silence the man rather than the mob. They are trying to silence a man who has done no wrong. Has he done wrongs in the past? Yes, he has. But he has not done the wrong that they're claiming here of leaking a documentary. He obeyed their draconian injunction, which, frankly, I probably wouldn't. I probably would have ended up breaking the law if I was in his shoes, so thank God it's him and not me. But he never broke any laws, and bear in mind, they've done this before. They did this at that November protest for anti-Semitism. Basically, he was at a cafe where he was arrested and pepper sprayed at point blank range while restrained, which goes against 2 of the 4 conditions of using CS spray. He was assaulted by police, and then he was held in jail unceremoniously on a charge he didn't commit, and they conveniently lost the body cam footage. Well, on that particular note, I think from now on it should be a criminal offence to knowingly delete evidence from body cam footage. I think it should be illegal for the police to delete their body cam footage, because if we had that body cam footage, we would have had overwhelming evidence against the police on that day that everything they did was illegal. Do you think they'd be getting away without compensation to Tommy Robinson? I don't. And then there was also the time outside Leeds Crown Court, where he basically went up to a few Muslims who were convicted of being part of grooming gangs in Leeds, and he said to them, and I quote, "How do you feel about your verdict, sir?" End quote. He said nothing that could have prejudiced the case, because the case was already over. And everything he did say during that time outside Leeds Crown Court was already in the public domain, most prominently in the BBC's homepage. So it was not information that wasn't already out there. And they did him in for contempt of court. And he had to spend, 5 months or so in solitary confinement. Firstly at HMP Hull, and then a few months at HMP Onley, where he basically came out looking like a stick, because he was so heavily malnourished and underweight, because he was worried the Muslims in there were poisoning his food. But again, details the mainstream media will omit from everything they want to tell you about Tommy Robinson. Now, I say these things because it's proving a point here. This is not being done because Tommy Robinson has committed a crime. It is being done to try and silence the man. This is being done by the government themselves. The Attorney General should not be engaged in petty things like this. The Attorney General, now correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't know a lot about the Attorney General, but I would have thought the Attorney General would have been used for cases of the utmost seriousness. I don't know, things like mass murder, mass rapings, incitement to terrorism, or actual terrorist attacks. Not going after a man just because his documentary got leaked and it wasn't even his fucking fault. But what do I know, I'm just a guy with a phone in his hand who's about to go to work in a few minutes, because obviously he has to be up there, otherwise he's not going to have an income. But the bottom line is this: they are not doing this, as I said, to persecute a criminal. They're doing this to silence a man for a crime he's never committed, for particularly malicious purposes, and to effectively try and stop a peaceful revolution. That's what it boils down to. They are hoping on the 27th that it's going to kick off. They hope that because of what's going on, they will have all the ammunition they need to push back against us, who the left would call Little Englanders. Or, sorry, have I got that wrong? Should it be extreme right or far right? Because that's what they like to label us as. But then it's really just projection at the end of the day. I wonder how long they would last if we started calling them far-left extremists and far-left racists and Anglophobes. How long do you think it would be before they report to Twitter? They can dish it, but they can't take it, basically. But enough about that. I better close this video down once and for all. So, we're obviously looking out for Tommy Robinson, because at the end of the day, as I said, this is no longer some petty court judge being done in a magistrate's court to avoid a jury. This, well, it's still being done in a magistrate court to avoid a jury. It's being done by the highest judge member, the highest judge in the land, the Attorney General. Why? To silence a man. Because they fear what he might say. And as I said, when you silence a man, you don't prove what he's saying is wrong, you prove that you're afraid of what he might say. And at this point, if the Attorney General fails to prosecute Tommy Robinson, I think this is going to be the biggest humiliation the government has ever faced. And of course, the biggest humiliation that the Attorney General will have ever faced in his entire life. And it will surely be the end of the Attorney General, because he will be hit with such a disgrace that he will basically be forced to resign to save face. It's that, or he'll have to face the repeated calls for him to resign for his treacherous actions against an English person. Because at the end of the day, Tommy's done no wrong, but the mainstream media won't tell you that. The government certainly won't tell you that. The government are merely afraid of what Tommy Robinson might say, because they fear that what he says might blow them all clean out the water. And they're worried, they're terrified that they're losing grip of their power. And like a cornered rat will show its fangs, they will do anything and everything they can to hold that power. So make sure we're there on the 27th of July. It's time to take out the trash. It's time to make sure these traitors in the houses of treachery, I mean Parliament, or maybe I was right first time, face the full extent of the political wrath of the British people. It is time for them to understand we will no longer tolerate fascistic governments trying to silence people because they want to hold on to this and their power.